In the world of true crime, some stories are strange. And then there are those that defy all logic. Twisted tales so dark, so bizarre, they blur the line between reality and nightmare. Today, we're diving deep into the top 5 most chilling and mind-bending true crime stories. Cases so twisted, they'll haunt you long after the video ends. Before we get going, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below to keep up with all the latest true crime cases like these. June 2nd, 2007. She walked into a Target store to buy a simple gift for her boyfriend. 90 minutes later, her car was found abandoned, the keys shoved under the seat, the present still inside. What happened next, captured in chilling surveillance footage, would turn a normal shopping trip into one of the most haunting crimes in recent American history: the disappearance of Kelsey Smith. Kelsey Ann Smith was the kind of girl everyone seemed to love. Born May 3, 1989, she grew up in Johnson County with her parents Greg and Missy and 4 siblings. Friends knew her as funny, outgoing, and full of life. She played the clarinet in her high school marching band, worked at the local AMC movie theater, and had just graduated Shawn Mission West High School. She had her whole life ahead of her. College in the fall, plans to become a veterinarian, and a boyfriend she adored. At 18, Kelsey was standing at the edge of adulthood, ready to step into her future. But fate had other plans. June 2nd, 2007. Overland Park, Kansas. It was an ordinary Saturday. Kelsey worked her usual shift at the theater. Nothing unusual. Later, she met her dad Greg, a police officer, and her sister Lindsay, and they all went to an amusement park. It was a carefree day, the kind you remember for a lifetime. But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, everything began to change. At 6 p.m., Kelsey told her dad she was heading to Target. Kelsey told her family she wanted to go shopping. She asked her sister to come along, but Lindsay declined. She wanted to buy a gift for her boyfriend, John. So Kelsey, ever independent, drove off alone to the local Target store. Before she left, she hugged her father and told him she loved him. Greg, who had taught all his children basic self-defense and safety awareness, never imagined it would be the last time he'd see his daughter alive. Around 7 p.m., Kelsey called her mom, Missy, who was driving home from a wedding. They spoke briefly, just the casual conversation of a daughter shopping and a mom on the road. They agreed to meet at home later. But later never came. When her boyfriend John stopped by the Smith home that evening, he expected to see Kelsey. Instead, she wasn't there. He tried calling her. No answer. He texted. Silence. Greg began calling too. Still nothing. And that's when alarm bells started ringing. Kelsey wasn't the kind of girl to vanish without notice. As minutes turned into hours, John and Lindsay couldn't sit still. They jumped in the car, determined to find her. They drove from parking lot to parking lot, scanning rows of vehicles for Kelsey's beige Buick. And then, there it was. But something wasn't right. Kelsey had told her dad she was going to Target, yet her car wasn't in the Target lot. It was parked near another store, in a dimly lit area that screamed danger. John approached the car. Inside, he saw the shopping bags, gift wrap, and a present Kelsey had bought for him, but no sign of Kelsey. Her keys were oddly shoved under the driver's seat, and sticking out of the trunk, a scrap of fabric, like a t-shirt, stuffed hastily inside. Greg, torn between his instincts as a cop and his dread as a father, told them not to touch anything. This was no accident. This was a crime scene. The Overland Park police arrived quickly. They scoured the car for evidence, but there were no signs of a struggle. No blood. No fingerprints they could link to family or friends. Just one unidentified thumbprint on the seatbelt. That fingerprint would later become a smoking gun. But for now, Kelsey had vanished without a trace. Her family's worst fears were becoming real. That night, detectives headed straight to Target. Maybe the surveillance cameras had answers. By the time they got inside, the store was closed. But an employee opened the doors and rolled back the footage. There was Kelsey, walking through the aisles, picking out wrapping paper and a gift. Calm, ordinary, nothing out of place. She paid, bagged her items, and headed for the exit. Then came the chilling detail. She walked into the parking lot, loaded her bags into the back seat, and climbed into the driver's seat. Seconds later, her car rolled out of the lot, but instead of heading home, it drove in the opposite direction. The quality of the footage was poor, and investigators couldn't tell if Kelsey was at the wheel or if someone else had forced her to drive. What they did know was this: she had never made it home. At dawn, Greg and Missy sat across from detectives in a sterile interview room. As a cop, Greg knew what was happening. In every missing persons case, investigators start by ruling out the family. It was brutal, but necessary. The faster police eliminated them, the sooner they could focus on finding who really took Kelsey. Both parents answered every question. They had nothing to hide. And soon, suspicion turned towards someone else, Kelsey's boyfriend, John. John was brought in for hours of questioning. Investigators circled around him with the same questions, worded different ways, searching for cracks in his story. Was he hiding something? Did he and Kelsey fight? But John didn't break. He insisted he loved her. He opened his phone to police, surrendered everything. His grief was raw, his answers consistent. Detectives believed him, though they kept him on the list. Meanwhile, Greg couldn't sit idly by. He knew the clock was ticking. Every passing hour made it less likely Kelsey would be found alive. So he and Missy launched their own search. Flyers were printed. Volunteers canvassed neighborhoods. Greg pleaded on the radio. Soon, TV stations picked up the story, blasting Kelsey's picture across Kansas. Hundreds joined the search. Classmates went door to door, begging for leads. Hope was alive, but fragile. Because as much as the family prayed for Kelsey's safe return, Greg knew the dark truth every cop knows. Abductions rarely end well. Back at Target, detectives replayed the surveillance footage again and again, this time on sharper monitors. And then, something they had missed before. As Kelsey entered her car, a blurry shadow flashed into frame, just behind her, almost like someone lunging. The door slammed, and in just 15 seconds, her car pulled away. It was enough. Police were no longer dealing with a runaway. This was an abduction, and whoever did it was still out there. The grainy surveillance footage revealed the truth no parent ever wants to face. Kelsey hadn't left Target alone. She had been taken. Detectives replayed the footage again, slower, frame by frame. That's when they saw him. A man in a white t-shirt and dark shorts. He wasn't shopping. He wasn't browsing. He was hunting. Everywhere Kelsey went, he followed. Not too close, not enough for her to notice, but always there. When she stopped, he lingered. When she walked, he trailed, and as she headed to checkout, he slipped out the door, waiting for her in the parking lot. It was now undeniable. This man was the predator. The images were released to the public. Police asked for help. The phones exploded. More than 1,000 tips poured in. Was it a neighbor? A stranger? Someone they all passed every day? But every lead led nowhere. The blurry face in the grainy stills stayed just that, a phantom. Meanwhile, Greg and Missy were living in agony. Their daughter had been missing for days, and the hope of finding her alive was slipping away with each passing hour. Hundreds of volunteers combed neighborhoods. Flyers plastered across streetlights, gas stations, and shop windows. At night, Greg lay awake, replaying the same thought. If someone had her, every minute counted. But without a location, it felt hopeless. That's when investigators turned to Kelsey's phone. Her cell phone had pinged off a tower near Longview Lake, Missouri, about 15 miles from the Target store. Finally, a lead. Within hours, the FBI joined the case. A massive search party was launched. Nearly 200 people scoured the wooded area. Every branch, every patch of leaves, every shadow was inspected. And then, they found her. It had been 4 agonizing days. Under a blanket of leaves and branches, searchers uncovered Kelsey's body. She had been stripped, discarded like evidence, hidden beneath the forest floor. Her belongings lay scattered nearby. Her life stolen in the cruelest way. Forensic experts confirmed what investigators already feared. Kelsey had been strangled to death with her own belt. The scene revealed a horrific truth. The motive had been sexual. Her family's worst nightmare had come true. Police now knew they weren't just looking for a kidnapper. They were looking for a killer. And he was still out there. The urgency skyrocketed. If he had done this once, he could do it again. And next time, another innocent girl could vanish. Detectives combed through the Target footage again, not just for Kelsey, but for anyone else. And there it was. At 9:17 p.m., Kelsey's Buick was abandoned in the dark corner where it was later found. Minutes later, cameras picked up a man sprinting across the lot and jumping into a dark pickup truck. At 9:22, the truck sped off. Rewinding further, detectives saw that same truck enter the lot at 6:55 p.m., 1 minute before Kelsey drove in. She had unknowingly parked right next to her predator. What began as chance ended in tragedy. The photos of the pickup truck, along with the image of the man in the white t-shirt, were plastered everywhere. And this time, the calls that came in weren't just guesses. They were solid. 2 people called separately. One said he was a coworker, another a friend. Both gave the same name, Edwin Hall, a 26-year-old husband and father, owner of a blue pickup truck, a man with a dark past. Hall had no adult convictions, but as a teenager, he had a violent streak. At just 15 years old, he'd threatened his adoptive sister with a bread knife. He was no stranger to rage. And now, police believed he had graduated to murder. Officers raced to Hall's home. When they arrived, he was outside, hurriedly loading bags into his car, his wife and child nearby. He was preparing to leave, but he never got the chance. Police moved in and arrested him on the spot. Inside the interrogation room, Hall played dumb. He claimed he didn't even know who Kelsey Smith was, said he had nothing to do with her disappearance or her death. But detectives had already seen him on camera, trailing her through the aisles, waiting for her in the lot. When confronted, he cracked. He admitted he had noticed her because he liked her legs. But still, he denied everything else. It didn't matter because the fingerprint in Kelsey's car was about to expose him completely. The walls were closing in on Edwin Hall. Every denial, every excuse, every lie, shattered by one undeniable piece of evidence. That lone thumbprint found on Kelsey's seatbelt, it was his. The match was clear. There was no other explanation. Hall had been inside her car. He had touched her seatbelt. And now, there was nowhere left to run. When detectives laid the evidence in front of him, Hall broke. He confessed. He admitted that he had spotted Kelsey in the Target parking lot. He admitted following her through the aisles. And when she returned to her car, he pulled a gun and forced his way inside. From that moment, Kelsey's fate was sealed. Hall drove her to a remote wooded area outside the city. He ordered her to undress. Then, in a twisted attempt to erase his crime, he strangled her with her own belt. Afterward, he covered her body with leaves and branches and abandoned her car in a different lot, hoping to buy himself time. He thought he had been clever. He thought he had erased his trail. But one fingerprint was enough to unravel everything. On paper, Edwin Hall looked ordinary. A husband, a father, a man with a steady job. But beneath that mask was something darker. Someone capable of watching an innocent girl walk into a store and deciding she wouldn't walk out alive. For Kelsey's parents, Greg and Missy, the confession was both a relief and a devastation. They finally had answers. They finally knew what had happened. But nothing could bring their daughter home. The weight of that truth is unbearable. One day, your daughter is laughing with you at an amusement park. The next, you're standing in a morgue, identifying her body. No parent should ever have to live that nightmare. In September 2008, Hall stood before a jury. He was charged with capital murder, aggravated kidnapping, and aggravated sexual assault. In court, he broke down. He apologized to Kelsey's family, said he was sorry, but his words meant nothing. The jury found him guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He would never walk free again. But for Greg and Missy Smith, justice wasn't enough. They had seen firsthand how slow the system could be. It had taken 4 days for Kelsey's cell phone company to release location data from her phone. 4 days of agony, 4 days of searching, 4 days too late. Because once police finally got the phone's location, they found Kelsey's body within just 45 minutes. That delay haunted her parents, and they refused to let it happen to anyone else. Out of unimaginable loss, they created a mission. Greg and Missy began pushing for a law that would allow law enforcement to access a missing person's cell phone location immediately, without waiting for a subpoena, without getting caught in red tape. They called it the Kelsey Smith Act. In 2009, Kansas passed it. Soon, more states followed. Today, versions of the law exist in over 20 states, giving police the power to act quickly when every second counts. The Smiths have spent more than a decade fighting to make it federal law, so no other family would ever have to endure the same nightmare. As Greg said, it would have saved 4 days of hunting, 4 days of not knowing if your child was alive. Kelsey Smith should have been 34 years old today. Her story isn't just about tragedy. It's about resilience, about a family who refused to let their daughter's death be meaningless. Because of them, countless lives may one day be saved. When Kelsey left for Target that evening, she hugged her father and said she loved him. Those were her last words. And though Greg and Missy will never get another chance to hear them, they've carried that love into everything they've done since. Evil stole their daughter's life, but it could not silence her voice. Through the law that bears her name, Kelsey Smith still speaks. If this case moved you, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps us bring more awareness to stories like these. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next true crime story we uncover. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. January 2017, Los Angeles, the land of dreams. But for one family, this winter afternoon would turn into a living nightmare. 16-year-old Isabella Cementilli came home to find her father Fabio slumped in his chair by the pool, covered in blood. He had been stabbed to death. On the night of the killing, two mysterious strangers were seen fleeing the property. A series of local robberies and the disappearance of Fabio's Porsche made it seem like a robbery gone wrong. A violent, lethal robbery. But something didn't fit. Fabio was still wearing his luxury watch worth $8,000 untouched. Nothing of real value had been taken. This wasn't about money. Someone had come for him, and only him. Behind the walls of the Cementilli mansion, dark secrets were hiding. Let's dive into the twisted story of Monica and Fabio Cementilli. Before we get going, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below to keep up with all the latest true crime cases like this one. January 23rd, 2017. It was a quiet Monday afternoon in Woodland Hills, Los Angeles. The sun was still high, the neighborhood calm, the kind of day where nothing extraordinary seemed possible. But inside a luxurious home at the end of a cul-de-sac, horror was waiting to be discovered. At 5:07 p.m., Isabella Cementilli pulled into the driveway. She was only 16, a high school student coming home after a long day of classes. For her, this house was supposed to be a place of comfort, a place where her father, Fabio, would often greet her with a warm smile. But as she stepped through the door, that comfort vanished. The house was silent, too silent. Drawers were pulled out, their contents scattered across the floor, cushions tossed aside. A scene of chaos, like someone had torn through the home in a hurry. And then, outside by the pool, Isabella saw him, her father. Fabio Cementilli was slumped in a chair, covered in blood. His face pale, his body motionless. He had been stabbed again and again, his life stolen in an act of sheer brutality. Isabella screamed, the kind of scream that comes from the gut, raw and broken. She dialed 911 with trembling hands, begging for help, but deep down, she knew it was already too late. When officers arrived minutes later, the backyard became a crime scene. Yellow tape went up. Neighbors gathered, whispering in disbelief. How could something like this happen here in such an upscale and quiet part of Los Angeles? Detectives began piecing together what little they had. To the untrained eye, it looked like a burglary gone wrong. The ransacked rooms, the missing Porsche from the driveway, the DVR ripped from the home's security system. But to seasoned investigators, something didn't add up. The drawers weren't just tossed. They were staged, too neat, too deliberate, as if someone had wanted it to look like a break-in. And why stab a man more than a dozen times if the motive was just theft? Burglars take what they want and run. They don't linger. They don't kill with such rage. Most important part, Fabio was still wearing $8,000 watch on his hand. They did not take it. This wasn't a robbery. This was personal. And the man who lay bleeding by the pool wasn't just anyone. Fabio Cementilli was a celebrity hairstylist, a respected figure in the beauty industry. Known worldwide, admired for his artistry, Fabio had built a life many envied. He was successful, wealthy, and adored by his family and friends. But now, his glamorous world was shattered. Detectives began their work the way they always do, start with the people closest to the victim. And at the top of that list was Fabio's wife, Monica. When Monica arrived home and saw the flashing lights, she collapsed into tears. To neighbors, she looked like a devastated widow. She wept. She clutched her daughters. She asked the same questions everyone else was asking. Who would do this? Why Fabio? But to detectives watching closely, something about her grief felt strange. Her tears came quickly, yes, but so did her questions. Questions not about who killed her husband, but about insurance, about money, about what would happen next. For now, investigators said nothing. They let her cry, but they made note of it, because grief is one thing, but grief mixed with calculation, that's something else entirely. Still, Monica wasn't the only possible lead. Detectives had to consider every angle. Was this a home invasion? A jealous rival? A random act of violence in an otherwise quiet neighborhood? The missing Porsche was their first tangible clue. If they could find it, maybe it would point them toward the killer. Within 24 hours, they did. The luxury car was found abandoned on a side street not far from the house. Whoever had taken it hadn't gone far. Inside the vehicle, forensic teams dusted for prints and collected samples. At first, it seemed like a dead end. No wallet, no weapon, no obvious trace of the killer. But what they did find, just a tiny drop of blood, would change everything. It wasn't Fabio's. It wasn't Monica's. It belonged to someone else entirely. And when that DNA was run through the system, detectives suddenly found themselves staring at a name that no one had expected. A name that would turn the case upside down. The DNA match came back, and with it, a name. A name detective didn't expect to see tied to the brutal murder of Fabio Cementilli. The man connected to that tiny drop of blood was Robert Baker. He wasn't some faceless burglar. He wasn't a stranger who got lucky breaking into the wrong house. No, Robert Baker was a convicted felon with a violent history. Assault, drugs, a life marked by run-ins with the law. He was the kind of man you wouldn't expect to cross paths with someone like Fabio Cementilli, a polished celebrity hairstylist with global recognition. So how did their worlds collide? That was the question detectives couldn't shake. They started digging deeper, not just into Baker's life, but into Fabio's. Because sometimes, the truth about a victim lies not in their public image, but in the private world they try to keep hidden. And Fabio's public image was dazzling. Born in Toronto, he had risen to fame through pure talent and charisma. He wasn't just a hairstylist, he was a master of his craft. A man who could transform anyone with a pair of scissors and a vision. He worked with celebrities, mentored young artists, and became an executive at Wella, one of the biggest names in the beauty industry. Colleagues admired him. Friends adored him. His family, at least from the outside, seemed perfect. Fabio and his wife Monica had been together for years. They lived in luxury, raised 2 daughters, and posted smiling photos that painted the picture of happiness. They had it all: money, travel, status, and love. Or so it seemed. Behind the walls of their Woodland Hills mansion, cracks were beginning to show. Monica, investigators learned, wasn't as satisfied as the world believed. She was restless, unfulfilled. While Fabio traveled for work and basked in his professional success, Monica often stayed home. She told friends she felt lonely, isolated, like she was fading into the background of her husband's shining spotlight. And in that loneliness, someone else slipped into her life. That someone was Robert Baker. At first glance, the two couldn't have been more different. Fabio, polished, respected, adored. Robert, rough, criminal, the kind of man with danger written all over him. But that danger, that recklessness, that was exactly what drew Monica in. Detectives began piecing together her secret life. Phone records, texts, meetings she hadn't told anyone about. The evidence pointed to more than just an affair. This wasn't about romance. It was about conspiracy. Monica and Robert weren't just lovers. They were plotting, whispering in the shadows, sharing thoughts not of love, but of freedom. And for Monica, freedom meant one thing: a life without Fabio. But why? Was it resentment? Greed? Desperation? The answer lay buried in the details. Insurance policies, financial struggles Monica kept hidden, promises of wealth and independence, if only one obstacle: her husband was out of the way. For detectives, suspicion was becoming certainty. This was no random burglary. This was no tragic mistake. This was a plan. And yet, one question still lingered in the air. How far would Monica and Robert go to make that plan a reality? The answer would come soon. Because as investigators pulled phone records and surveillance footage, a chilling timeline began to take shape. A timeline that didn't just suggest Monica's involvement, it practically screamed it. Detectives spread the phone records across their desks like puzzle pieces. Line after line of calls, texts, encrypted messages, thousands of them. At first glance, it looked impossible to sort through. But when they mapped the data against Fabio's final weeks of life, a disturbing pattern emerged. Robert Baker and Monica Sementilli weren't just in contact, they were in constant contact. Morning, afternoon, night, sometimes dozens of times in a single hour. The kind of obsessive communication that spoke not of casual romance, but of something darker. And it wasn't just words. Surveillance footage from the days leading up to January 23rd showed Monica running errands, meeting Robert in parking lots, slipping away when Fabio wasn't around. But the most chilling detail wasn't how often they spoke, it was what they discussed. Hidden in the flurry of calls were conversations about Fabio's schedule, when he traveled, when he was home, what time Isabella got out of school, where the family kept their valuables, even the login information for the house's security cameras. Piece by piece, Monica was handing Robert the blueprint to her husband's life, and soon, his death. The timeline of January 23rd told the story in brutal clarity. That afternoon, Fabio had been relaxing at home. The weather was warm, the pool sparkling in the sunlight. His daughter would be home from school later, but for now, he was alone. Monica, detectives discovered, had deliberately left the house earlier that day. She went shopping at Target. Receipts and surveillance video confirming her alibi. She had even encouraged Isabella to run errands after school, ensuring that no one would be there when Robert arrived. At roughly the same time, Robert Baker wasn't alone either. He had brought someone with him, an old friend named Christopher Austin, a man with a troubled past of his own. Together, the two slipped into the Sementilli home. The details of what happened next were pieced together from forensics, confessions, and the bloody trail Robert left behind. Fabio, caught off guard, had no chance to defend himself. The attack was sudden, violent, and merciless. More than a dozen stab wounds, many to the face and neck, wounds that spoke not of efficiency, but of rage. When it was over, Robert and Austin set about staging the scene. They pulled drawers, scattered clothes, ripped out the DVR, and stole Fabio's Porsche to make it look like a burglary. But what they couldn't hide was Robert's mistake. In the chaos, he cut himself. His blood dripped in the Porsche, a single drop that tied him to the crime forever. By the time Isabella walked through the door, her father's killers were already gone. For detectives, the evidence was overwhelming. Monica's alibi was too perfect, Robert's DNA was indisputable, and the thousands of phone calls between them left little doubt about the depth of their connection. But when confronted, Monica denied everything. She said Robert was obsessed with her, that she never wanted any part of it. She claimed he acted alone, fueled by jealousy and delusion. Detectives weren't convinced, because buried in those phone records, in the surveillance footage, in the financial documents, was something Monica couldn't explain away. She had motive. Fabio's life insurance policy was worth nearly $1.6 million. If he died, Monica stood to inherit it all. And with Robert by her side, she would have both the money and the man she desired. Love, greed, freedom. It was all within her reach. But in her desperation, she had underestimated two things: the precision of forensic science and the persistence of homicide detectives. Still, suspicion wasn't the same as conviction. The case was building, yes, but prosecutors needed more. They needed to show the world that this wasn't just a jealous lover's crime. This was a conspiracy. A cold, calculated murder for money plot. And to prove it, they would have to take Monica and Robert to trial, where every secret, every call, every betrayal would be laid bare for the world to see. The investigation had given detectives enough to charge, but charging was only the beginning. To prove Monica and Robert's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, the case had to survive the bright lights and sharp edges of a Los Angeles courtroom. And when the trial began, the polished image Monica had carefully crafted for years began to crumble. On one side sat the prosecution, armed with forensics, records, and a narrative of greed and betrayal. On the other sat Monica and Robert, two lovers bound by a terrible secret, each hoping the other would take the fall. From the very first witness, the courtroom was gripped. Prosecutors began by walking the jury through the crime scene. Photographs of Fabio slumped by the pool. Images of the ransacked rooms. The stolen Porsche abandoned on a quiet street. But the pictures alone weren't what held the jurors' attention. It was the science behind them. A forensic expert pointed to the drop of blood inside the Porsche, the one mistake Robert Baker could never undo. It was his DNA, no one else's. Proof he had been there. Proof he had touched the car. Proof he had taken part in the killing. Robert's attorneys tried to explain it away. Maybe he borrowed the car before. Maybe the blood got there some other way. But the jurors weren't buying it. Too many coincidences. Too many holes. Then came the phone records. Thousands of calls. Dozens a day. Stretching back months. Monica and Robert weren't just acquaintances. They weren't even just lovers. Their communication was constant, obsessive, almost impossible to hide. The prosecution laid out the timeline. Monica leaving the house, Robert arriving, the security system disabled, the murder itself. Every piece slotted neatly into place, painting a picture too chilling to ignore. And then the motive. Financial records showed Monica's growing debts, credit cards maxed out, spending habits outpacing income, and hanging over it all, the $1.6 million life insurance policy that named her as the beneficiary. Fabio's death wasn't just convenient, it was profitable. The jury sat in silence, eyes locked on Monica. But the defense fought back. Monica's lawyers painted her as a grieving widow caught in Robert's web. They argued Robert acted alone, fueled by obsession, hoping that by eliminating Fabio, Monica would run into his arms. Robert, for his part, didn't help himself. He shifted stories, sometimes admitting he was there, sometimes denying it, sometimes hinting Monica knew, sometimes insisting she didn't. His contradictions only deepened the suspicion that this was no simple crime of passion. And then, the most devastating testimony came not from experts or strangers, but from Monica herself. When she took the stand, jurors leaned forward. Her voice trembled, her tears flowed, but her words were careful. Too careful. She denied planning Fabio's death. She denied conspiring with Robert. She even denied loving him at all, calling him dangerous, unstable, manipulative. But the prosecution had her cornered. They confronted her with messages, intimate words, promises, plans. Not the language of fear, but of desire. Not a woman distancing herself from a predator, but one binding herself to him. The courtroom shifted. Whispers spread across the gallery. Monica's performance wasn't convincing. The jury could see the cracks, and when closing arguments came, the picture was clear. The prosecution described a woman who wanted out of her marriage. A woman who wanted money, freedom, and excitement. A woman who found all of it in Robert Baker and who helped him take her husband's life to get it. The defense countered with pleas of reasonable doubt. But the evidence was too strong, the motive too clear, the timeline too damning. The jurors left to deliberate. Hours stretched into days. The tension in the courtroom was unbearable. Monica sat rigid, eyes forward, her daughters behind her, torn between love for their mother and grief for their father. Finally, the jury returned. The verdict would decide not just Monica and Robert's fate, but the legacy of Fabio Cementilli, the man who had given so much to his family and his industry, only to have it ripped away in one brutal act. The clerk stood. The room fell silent, and as the words rang out, Monica's face barely moved. She was found guilty. So was Robert. Monica and Robert were sentenced to life without parole, their freedom gone. For Isabella and her sister, life without their father was unbearable, every joy now tinged with grief. The courtroom gasped. For some, justice had finally been served. For others, it was a tragedy on top of a tragedy, the complete destruction of a family. But for the detectives who had followed the trail from a single drop of blood, the outcome confirmed what they had suspected from the very beginning. This was never a burglary. This was never random. It was betrayal. Cold, calculated, intimate. And yet, even as Monica was led away in handcuffs, one question still hung in the air. Why? Why had a glamorous life, a loving family, and a successful husband not been enough? Why had she risked everything, her freedom, her daughters, her future, for a man like Robert Baker? The answers weren't clear. Perhaps they never would be. The Cementilli story is a haunting reminder. Appearances deceive, and the people closest to us can sometimes bring the darkest harm. Trust can be deadly. Love can be lethal. If this case moved you, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps us bring more awareness to stories like these. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next true crime story we uncover. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Anna Marie Abelabin was a young mother searching for peace. After years in a troubled marriage with a famous influencer, she finally moved into a new apartment, hoping for a fresh start with her daughter. She wanted freedom, safety, and a chance to rebuild her life. But while Anna was trying to move forward, someone was watching. Someone who refused to let her go. And on one October afternoon, inside that high-rise apartment, everything came crashing down. 2 lives were lost in an instant, and the shocking truth behind a marriage filled with secrets was exposed. How could love twist so quickly into obsession? And how could a man known online for making people laugh turn into a cold-blooded killer? This is the case of 28-year-old Anna Marie Abelabin. Anna wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't famous. She was simply a young woman trying to live her life like so many others. Friends described her as kind, gentle, and always ready to help the people she cared about. She loved music, she loved laughing with her friends, and she adored being a mother. Her daughter was her world, the reason she kept pushing through, even when things at home became unbearable. Because behind closed doors, Anna's marriage wasn't a fairy tale. Her husband, Ali Abulaban, had two sides. Online, millions knew him as Jin Kid, a TikTok star famous for his spot-on Scarface impressions and short comedy videos. He was charming, funny, and magnetic. The kind of man strangers thought they'd want to hang out with. But behind the screen, Ali was someone else entirely. At home, he was jealous, controlling, quick to anger. He demanded Anna's loyalty, but on his terms. In the beginning, Anna saw the charming side. Like many relationships, it started with laughter and promises. They shared big dreams, they traveled, they built a family together. To the outside world, it looked perfect. But slowly, the cracks began to show. Ali's love was not the kind that lifts you up. It was the kind that weighs you down. If Anna didn't answer a call, he accused her of lying. If she went out with friends, he questioned who she was with. His jealousy wasn't playful, it was suffocating. As his TikTok fame grew, so did his paranoia. Millions of people adored him online, yet in his personal life, he became more demanding, more insecure, more dangerous. Anna was walking on eggshells. Every choice she made seemed to spark an argument. Every step toward independence felt like a threat to Ali's fragile pride. Imagine the contrast. Online, Ali is smiling into his phone camera, making strangers laugh. He's energetic, confident, adored. At home, Anna sits quietly, exhausted, unsure of which version of her husband will come through the door. This double life, the entertainer and the abuser, was a storm waiting to break. By 2021, Anna had reached her breaking point. She wanted out. It wasn't an easy decision. Like so many women in abusive relationships, she held on, hoping things might change. She stayed for her daughter, hoping Ali might grow, hoping he might find balance. But deep down, she knew the cycle wasn't going to stop, so she made the hardest choice of all. She left. Anna moved into a high-rise apartment in San Diego. It was modern, safe, a fresh start. To her, it represented more than just four walls. It was freedom. It was the promise of a life without fear. For the first time in years, Anna could breathe again. But Ali couldn't let go. To him, Anna's move wasn't survival. It was betrayal. He wasn't just losing a wife. He was losing control. And Ali was not about to accept that. When Anna left, she thought she was closing a chapter. But for Ali, it was just the beginning of something much darker. He still had the keys. He still had access. And soon, he would find a way to infiltrate Anna's new life without her even knowing. By turning their daughter's iPad into a listening device, Ali gave himself a window into Anna's private world. From miles away, he could hear her conversations, her laughter, her attempts to move forward. Every sound fueled his anger. Anna believed she was safe inside that apartment, but she wasn't. She was being watched. And then came October 21st, the day everything changed. The day Ali decided to end the story his way. But how did a man known for making millions laugh become a killer hiding in plain sight? And what exactly did he hear through that iPad that pushed him over the edge? Every love story begins with hope. For Anna and Ali, it started with laughter, excitement, and the promise of a bright future. He made her laugh, made her feel special, and for a while, life felt good. They married. They had a daughter. They posted photos of their trips, their smiles, their family moments. To outsiders, It was picture perfect. But behind those smiles, Anna carried a weight no one else could see. Because Ali wasn't just her husband, he was two different men. To strangers online, he was Jin Kid, a funny, magnetic TikTok star whose Scarface impressions and comedy skits gained him hundreds of thousands of fans. People adored him. They saw charm, wit, and confidence. But to Anna, behind closed doors, he was someone else entirely. Ali was jealous, suspicious, controlling. The smallest things could trigger his anger. If Anna didn't pick up a call, he assumed she was hiding something. If she spent time with friends, he accused her of betrayal. And slowly, his love began to feel less like love and more like a cage. As Ali's TikTok fame grew, so did the problem. For most people, success would bring happiness. For Ali, it fueled his paranoia. Every follower, every like, every share inflated his ego, but also deepened his insecurities. He could make millions of strangers laugh, but in his own home, he couldn't find peace. And that contradiction ate at him. Anna noticed the change. Friends noticed too. They described her as tense, guarded, like she was always bracing for the next argument. She still smiled, still showed up for her daughter. But underneath, she was exhausted. Living with Ali wasn't joy, it was survival. Picture their apartment at night. Ali, pacing the room, questioning Anna about who she had spoken to that day. Anna, tired, sitting quietly, trying to say the right words so the argument wouldn't explode. Their daughter in the other room, innocent, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond her door. And then, hours later, Ali pulling out his phone to film a comedy skit, grinning as if nothing had happened. This was the split life Anna was trapped in. The man the world saw and the man she knew. Anna loved her daughter deeply, and for years, that love kept her in the marriage. She wanted her child to grow up with both parents. She wanted to believe Ali's apologies, to believe he could change. But the cycle never ended. There would be a fight, then tears, then promises to do better. And then, before long, another fight. Anna realized she couldn't keep living like this. She couldn't keep pretending. For her daughter's sake, and for her own safety, she had to leave. It was a decision many women in abusive relationships face, and it was terrifying. But Anna found her courage. In the fall of 2021, she moved into a high-rise apartment in San Diego. It was modern, secure, and private. For Anna, those walls represented freedom, a chance to breathe again. Friends said she looked lighter, like she was finally finding herself again. She focused on her daughter, tried to reconnect with loved ones, and slowly began piecing together a life without Ali's control. Anna believed the worst was behind her, but she underestimated just how far Ali's obsession would go. To Ali, Anna's decision wasn't just a separation. It was betrayal. He didn't see her move as a cry for freedom. He saw it as humiliation. In his mind, Anna wasn't leaving an unhealthy marriage. She was rejecting him. And rejection was something Ali couldn't handle. He convinced himself she was seeing someone else, that she was replacing him. And the thought of Anna building a life without him drove him into a spiral. What Anna saw as a fresh start, Ali saw as war. Ali wasn't willing to let go, not even for a moment. He still had the keys. He still had ways to get inside her space. And soon, he took it even further. By installing listening software on their daughter's iPad, Ali turned an innocent child's tablet into a weapon of surveillance. From miles away, he could hear Anna's conversations. He could listen to her life. Every laugh, every word, every private moment. It all filtered back to him. To Anna, her apartment was a safe space. To Ollie, it became a stage where he could spy on the woman who no longer wanted him. Imagine Anna sitting in her living room, maybe laughing with a friend, maybe enjoying a quiet moment after putting her daughter to bed. She thought she was free. She thought the worst was behind her. But she had no idea that Ollie was listening, that every sound of her new life was fueling his rage. And then in October of 2021, Ollie heard something that sent him over the edge, something that made him believe his darkest suspicions were true. And with that, he made a choice that would destroy everything: Anna's freedom, his own future, and the life of the very child they both claimed to love. When Anna closed the door to her marriage, she thought she was finally free. The new apartment was her sanctuary, a high-rise with secure doors, clean walls, and wide windows that looked out over San Diego. She had her daughter by her side and a vision of a fresh start. But while Anna believed she was safe, she wasn't alone. Her past was still watching her, listening to her, breathing down her neck, because Ollie hadn't let go. Instead of moving forward, Ollie's world shrank the moment Anna walked out. His fame, his followers, his comedy skits, all of it meant nothing compared to the fact that Anna had left him. He couldn't accept it. He convinced himself she wasn't just leaving, she was betraying him. And with every hour that passed, his obsession grew. Ali started visiting the apartment when Anna wasn't there. He still had the keys, and he used them. He went through her things, checked her spaces, looked for any clue of another man in her life. But even that wasn't enough. He needed more. He needed to hear her. That's when he turned to something chilling. Ali used their daughter's iPad as a tool of surveillance. By secretly installing listening software, he gave himself the power to eavesdrop on Anna's private world. When Anna spoke in her apartment, Ali could hear her from miles away. When she laughed with friends, he listened. When she tried to enjoy her new life, he was there, invisible, feeding on every sound. The device meant for a child's innocence had become his window into Anna's freedom. In October 2021, Ollie's surveillance delivered him the spark he was waiting for. One afternoon, listening through the iPad, he believed he heard a man inside Anna's apartment. To him, it was confirmation of the betrayal he had been obsessing over. In his mind, Anna wasn't just leaving him. She was replacing him. And in that moment, Ollie's paranoia, his pride, and his anger fused into something deadly. From that point on, Ollie's mind was set. He didn't see divorce. He didn't see counseling. He didn't see co-parenting. He saw revenge. And once that thought took root, nothing and no one could pull him back. Anna, unaware of what was happening in Ollie's mind, kept trying to build her new life. She made plans, reached out to loved ones, and focused on her daughter's future. She had no idea the danger was closing in. No idea that Ollie's jealousy had crossed into something irreversible. The distance between them, the apartment doors, the city streets, the legal separation, meant nothing. October 21st, 2021. For Anna, it started like any other day in her San Diego apartment. She went about her morning routine, focused on her daughter, her future, and the fragile peace she was building. But for Ali, this wasn't just another day. It was the day he decided to act. Through the iPad, Ali believed he had heard another man in Anna's apartment. To him, it wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was proof. His ego, already fragile and consumed by jealousy, snapped. He wasn't going to sit back and listen anymore. He was going to confront her. He was going to make her pay. Ali got into his car and began the drive to Anna's high-rise apartment. As he sped through San Diego, his mind was racing, boiling with anger. Every mile that passed only fueled his rage. This wasn't a calm man making rational choices. This was someone unraveling, giving in to his darkest impulses. And by the time he reached the building, he had already made his decision. Ali walked through the doors of Anna's apartment complex like he still belonged there. He still had access, still had the keys. Up the elevator, down the hall, until finally, he stood outside her door. Inside, Anna was unaware of the storm about to burst into her life. When Ali stepped into the apartment, he wasn't alone. Anna was there, and so was a man. His name was Rayburn Cardenas Barron, a friend who happened to be with her that afternoon. To Ali, that sight was enough. It was the confirmation of every paranoid thought, every jealous suspicion, and in that instant, he snapped. Ali pulled out a gun. The confrontation was fast, chaotic, and brutal. Before Anna could process what was happening, before Rayburn could react, Ali opened fire. First, he shot Rayburn. Then he turned the gun on Anna. 2 lives ended in an instant. The very woman he once claimed to love, the mother of his child, was gone. Silence filled the room after the gunshots, the kind of silence that only follows violence. Anna lay dead in her own home. Rayburn's life was also stolen in that same moment. And Ali wasn't done. He looked around the apartment at the destruction he had caused, and instead of remorse, he felt vindicated. In his twisted mind, he had taken back control. But then came the chilling part. Instead of fleeing, Ali picked up the phone, and the first person he called was his daughter. He told her what he had just done. Imagine the weight of those words landing on a child, the man she called Dad, admitting that he had just killed her mother. It was cruel, unforgivable. Another scar on a little girl who had already been through too much. After that call, Ali left the apartment. Police were quickly notified. Within hours, Ali was tracked down and arrested along a highway. He didn't fight, he didn't resist. The funny man from TikTok, the rising star who once made millions laugh, was now in handcuffs, accused of double murder. And the apartment that had once been Anna's sanctuary was now a crime scene. News of the crime spread quickly. The story was shocking. A TikTok comedian accused of killing his wife and her friend in cold blood. For Anna's loved ones, the headlines were unbearable. They hadn't just lost a daughter, a sister, a friend. They had lost her in the most violent, public way possible. And for the little girl caught in the middle, her entire world had been ripped apart in a single afternoon. How does someone go from making people laugh to committing cold-blooded murder? How does a marriage filled with love and promises collapse into violence and death? Now came the trial, a courtroom battle that would expose the darkest sides of Ali's obsession. Ali was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, one for his wife, Anna Marie Abulaban, and one for Rayburn Cardenas Barron, the man who happened to be in her apartment that afternoon. The prosecution painted a chilling picture. Ali wasn't a man who snapped in the heat of the moment. He was calculated. He had spied on Anna, planned his move, and carried it out without hesitation. This wasn't passion, this was execution. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy. Family members sat in silence, listening to the details no loved one should ever have to hear. Witnesses recounted Anna's fear, her attempts to escape, and Ali's growing paranoia. And then there was the testimony about the iPad, how Ali had used his own daughter's device to stalk his wife. To many, that detail was the most haunting of all. It showed not only his obsession, but his willingness to corrupt something innocent to fuel his rage. Ali's defense tried to argue that he had been pushed to the edge, that he acted in a jealous rage, not with cold calculation. They painted him as unstable, a man who lost control. But the evidence told another story. The software on the iPad, the gun he carried, the way he entered the apartment, the order of the shots. It wasn't chaos. It was deliberate. What stood out most during the trial wasn't Ali's excuses. It was Anna's absence. Her family and friends spoke for her. They described her kindness, her strength, her deep love for her daughter. They painted the picture of a woman who deserved so much more than the violence she endured. Every word was a reminder of the person behind the headlines. A reminder that Anna was more than a victim. She was a mother, a sister, a friend. In May 2024, the jury reached its decision. Ali Abulaban was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The man who once stood in front of a camera, making millions laugh, would now spend the rest of his life behind bars. But no sentence could undo the damage. For Anna's daughter, the verdict meant growing up without both parents, one buried, the other locked away, forever. For Anna's family, it meant carrying the weight of grief for the rest of their lives. And for the public, it was a shocking reminder that behind social media smiles, darkness can hide. Think about it. Anna was just 28 years old. She wasn't famous. She wasn't asking for attention. She simply wanted a fresh start, a safe home, and a chance to raise her daughter in peace. But because of one man's obsession, her life was stolen. Anna Marie Abulaban wanted what anyone wants: freedom, safety, and love. But instead, her life was cut short by the very person who once promised to protect her. And as the world remembers her, one question still lingers. How does someone known for making people laugh turn into a killer? It's a question with no easy answer. But for Anna and for her daughter, the consequences will last forever. If this case moved you, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps us bring more awareness to stories like these. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next true crime story we uncover. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. On the night of April 25th, 2021, Taylor Pomoski, a bright, loving 29-year-old woman from Spring, Texas, walked into her own home during what was supposed to be a casual backyard party. It would be the last time anyone saw her alive. But by the next morning, Taylor was gone. Her car sat waiting in the driveway, her phone and purse untouched, her beloved dog still inside the house. It was as if the world had swallowed her whole. A young woman who begged for help and then erased in a way that still shocks investigators today. This is the terrifying story of Taylor Pomoski, how she disappeared into the night, and how the truth that followed was far darker than anyone could have imagined. To her friends and family, Taylor Pomoski wasn't just another face in the crowd. She had that rare kind of warmth that could light up an entire room. The kind of person who made you feel seen, who remembered the little things most people forgot. Your birthday, the exact way you liked your coffee, the story you told months ago that she'd bring up just to make you smile again. She had a laugh that was contagious, a smile that drew people in, and a heart that always reached out. If you were having a bad day, Taylor was the friend who checked in. If her mom hadn't heard from her by evening, Taylor was already dialing her number, just to say those 3 simple words, "I love you." She was dependable. She was present. She was loved. But in the months before her disappearance, something shifted. Taylor's once bright energy seemed dimmer. Her calls became less frequent. Her texts shorter. She started canceling plans without reason, pulling away from the people who loved her most. The reason was Kevin Ware Jr. On the surface, it looked like something exciting, an athlete boyfriend, once an NFL player. To outsiders, it might have seemed like she was stepping into a bigger life, a life larger than their quiet Texas suburb. But behind closed doors, that dream quickly soured into something far darker. Taylor began carrying herself differently. Friends noticed she seemed smaller, as if a weight pressed down on her, one she couldn't put into words. She confided in whispers, "Sometimes he scares me." And to another friend, "Things have been intense. I don't know what to do." But each time, she brushed it off. She laughed nervously, insisted she was just being dramatic. The truth? Taylor was slipping into a dangerous relationship, one marked by fear, silence, and control. And the people around her didn't realize just how deadly it was becoming. Sunday, April 25th, 2021. Taylor and Kevin hosted a casual gathering at their home on Stallion Brook Lane. Friends drifted in, music played, laughter filled the rooms. But beneath the surface, tension was boiling. Guests described sudden shouting matches, arguments that cut through the fun like glass breaking. At one point, the fight between Taylor and Kevin became so heated that the entire party fell silent. One friend remembered Taylor looking desperate, almost as if she wanted to run. Another said she had been locked in a room for part of the evening. By midnight, most of the guests had left. And Taylor? She never did. Her car never moved. Her purse, her phone, her beloved dog, all left behind. From that night forward, she vanished. But here's what made it even worse. Nobody called the police. Nobody raised the alarm. Taylor's disappearance was swallowed in silence. For Taylor's parents, silence was unthinkable. She called her mom every single day. It was part of who she was. But now, her phone went dark. No calls, no texts. Her friends waited. Maybe she needed space, they thought. Maybe she was sorting things out. But her parents knew better. By early May, after over a week without hearing her voice, they contacted police. At first, officers weren't alarmed. In Texas, as in most states, adults have the right to disappear. And a 29-year-old woman going silent? Police have seen it before. But this wasn't like Taylor. Her bank account showed no activity. Her phone gave off no signals. Her social media, usually alive with posts and pictures, sat frozen. She hadn't just gone quiet. She had been erased. When officers entered her home for the first welfare check, nothing seemed obviously wrong. No forced entry, no blood, no overturned furniture. But something felt off. The bathroom. It looked spotless. Too spotless. The shower grout scrubbed raw, the air heavy with bleach. No record of a cleaning service. No explanation for why a bathroom had been practically sterilized overnight. And then there was the neighbor. She mentioned something strange, that on the night Taylor vanished, she saw smoke rising from the backyard. A fire that flared briefly in the dark, then faded before dawn. At the time, she thought it was nothing. Maybe they were burning trash. But to investigators, it was a detail that couldn't be ignored. What exactly had been burned? As investigators dug deeper, the pieces of Taylor's last weeks painted a terrifying picture. Just 4 weeks before she vanished, she made a late-night call to a friend, whispering, "If something happens to me, please remember this." The call lasted minutes before abruptly ending. In her email drafts, detectives found one chilling subject line. "In case you need to know." The body of the message contained only a single line. "I didn't fall off the radar." They pushed me. It had never been sent. On April 7th, police responded to a domestic disturbance at her house. Body cam footage showed Taylor rigid, avoiding eye contact, whispering that she was fine. She refused to press charges. The officers left. Case closed. The signs were there. She was scared. She was isolated. She was warning the people around her. But nothing was done. And now she was gone. The biggest problem, nobody officially reported Taylor missing until May 9th, nearly 2 weeks after the party. By then, time had destroyed critical evidence. Security cameras had already overwritten footage. Trash had been collected twice. Witness memories had started to blur. Police canvassed the neighborhood. Neighbors recalled loud music, shouting, and that mysterious fire. Kevin told investigators the same story. Taylor walked out after an argument. But if that were true, why did she leave her car, her purse, her dog, and why did the bathroom look like someone had tried to bleach it out of existence? Investigators returned with forensic tools, and this time, the house began to whisper its secrets. In the bathroom grout, microscopic traces of blood, invisible to the eye, but undeniable under chemical testing. In the hallway carpet, faint blood markers embedded deep in the padding, leading from the bathroom toward the back door. And in the backyard soil, not just the remnants of burned wood, but chemical markers from synthetic clothing fibers, human tissue, and bone ash. It was clear now. Someone had tried to erase Taylor Pomoski, but they hadn't succeeded. Yet even with those findings, the case remained stuck in limbo. There was no body, no weapon, no confirmed crime scene. Legally, Taylor was still just a missing person. But everything was about to change. When Taylor Pomoski vanished after a backyard party in April 2021, investigators had almost nothing to go on. No witnesses, no body, only a spotless bathroom that smelled of bleach and a neighbor's memory of a fire in the dark. For months, Taylor's family begged for answers. They searched, they prayed, they hoped she would walk through the door. But the truth came on December 2021, 8 months later, when a worker in rural Harris County stumbled upon charred remains in a drainage ditch. The ditch was overgrown, isolated, the kind of place you'd only find if you were looking for it. Among the brush and debris, investigators recovered fragments of clothing, melted zippers, and brittle, burned pieces of bone. At first, there was doubt. Could it be Taylor? Or was this another unknown tragedy hidden in the soil? But the dental records left no question. After nearly a year of silence, Taylor Pomoski had been found. Not alive, not safe, but in fragments, burned and broken. For her family, the confirmation shattered every last piece of hope. And for investigators, it transformed the case from a missing person mystery into a full homicide investigation. From the very beginning, suspicion had swirled around one man, Kevin Ware Jr. But even as investigators built their case, one haunting question remained. Why? Why would Kevin, a man who had once lived under the bright lights of the NFL, who had tasted success and fame, turn so violently on Taylor, the woman he lived with, the woman who trusted him? A former NFL player turned troubled drifter, Kevin's life had long been marked by arrests, drugs, and violence. He was the last known person to see Taylor alive. He was the man she had argued with on the night she vanished. And now, forensic evidence was pulling the threads of this story straight toward him. Investigators pored over every piece of evidence from Taylor's home and the ditch where her remains were discovered. The bathroom. Forensic teams found microscopic traces of Taylor's blood proteins in the grout, despite heavy bleaching. The hallway carpet. Beneath the surface, faint blood markers led from the bathroom straight toward the back door. The backyard. Soil samples revealed burned synthetic fibers from clothing, biological tissue, and bone ash. Someone had tried, and failed, to incinerate evidence. The ditch. Chemical testing showed similar burn residues, consistent with the failed attempt in the backyard. And then came the most damning piece of all. Cell phone data. Kevin Ware's phone pinged near the remote ditch the morning after the party, precisely where Taylor's remains would later be found. He had no reason to be there. No explanation. To prosecutors, it wasn't just evidence. It was a map of guilt. As the investigation intensified, witnesses from the party began coming forward again. One recalled hearing Taylor and Kevin screaming behind a closed door. Another admitted that Kevin was seen using a power washer on the back patio just hours after the party ended. And inside jail, where Kevin was being held on unrelated gun and drug charges, inmates claimed he made cryptic remarks. "I got rid of the problem. Cleaned it up well." Individually, none of these details could convict him. But together, they painted a chilling portrait of a man who thought he could outsmart everyone. Even more damning was what investigators found on Kevin's second phone, one he had tried to wipe clean. Forensic teams recovered fragments of deleted messages from an encrypted app. One line sent shivers down investigators' spines. "It's done, just like we planned." No name, no timestamp, but recovered from the very night Taylor vanished. It was the kind of smoking gun criminals think they've erased, until technology proves otherwise. By mid-2022, prosecutors had enough to take the case before a grand jury. They presented cell tower records tying Kevin to the ditch, forensic evidence of bleach, burned clothing, and Taylor's DNA in the house, witness testimony of arguments, cleaning, and suspicious fires, the chilling digital messages, and Kevin's own cryptic jailhouse remarks. On July 28, 2022, the grand jury indicted Kevin Ware Jr. on one count of murder and one count of tampering with a human corpse. Kevin's attorneys called it all circumstantial. For Taylor's family, it was a moment of grim relief. After months of silence, someone was finally being held accountable. Even with the indictment, the case was far from simple. Taylor's exact cause of death could not be determined. Her remains were too damaged by fire. No murder weapon was ever recovered. There were no direct eyewitnesses to the killing. But prosecutors didn't need a neat story. They had something stronger. The weight of countless details that, together, told the truth. As one investigator said, "We didn't get a confession. We got something better. We uncovered every step he took to hide what he did, and that tells its own story." In April 2023, almost 2 years after Taylor's disappearance, Kevin Ware finally faced the music. Rather than risk a trial where the forensic evidence could bury him, he took a plea deal. In court, he pled guilty to murder and tampering with a human corpse. The sentence, 30 years in state prison. There was no dramatic trial, no chance for Taylor's loved ones to face him across a courtroom. Just paperwork, a guilty plea, and the cold sound of a gavel closing a chapter. For Taylor's family, the sentence was bittersweet. Yes, Kevin would spend decades behind bars, but justice came without answers. They would never know exactly how she died. They would never know if she suffered. They would never know if anyone else helped cover up her murder. And most painfully, they would never get her back. At a private memorial, her mother whispered, "She kept trying to leave. She just didn't get far." Among the most haunting pieces of this case was something found long before Kevin was convicted. In Taylor's email drafts, investigators discovered that unsent message, subject, "in case you need to know," and inside, just one line, "I didn't fall off the radar, they pushed me." Taylor Pomoski was only 29 years old when her life was stolen. A daughter, a friend, a bright light silenced by someone who thought he could make her vanish. But she didn't vanish. Her story lives on. If this case moved you, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps us bring more awareness to stories like these. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next true crime story we uncover. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Tonight, we're uncovering one of the most chilling abduction cases in modern American history. A story that proves just how quickly an ordinary day can turn into a nightmare. This is the terrifying true story of Abigail Hernandez, a 14-year-old girl who vanished on her way home from school. And weeks later, her mother found a strange letter, handwritten, signed by her daughter. But the words inside? Terrifying. For 9 months, her family lived a nightmare. What really happened in the 9 months that followed is darker than anyone could imagine. Born on October 1998 in Manchester, New Hampshire, Abigail, or Abby to her family and friends, was the youngest daughter of Ruben and Xenia Hernandez. She grew up with her older sister Sarah in what seemed like a typical American family. Her mother worked tirelessly as a nurse. Her father was a sales agent, and although her parents eventually separated, Abby remained close to both of them. She was especially bonded to her sister Sarah, her confidant, her best friend, the one person she trusted with everything. Friends described Abby as brave, friendly, and endlessly optimistic. At only 14 years old, she was already dreaming big, ready to take on life. But then came October 9th, 2013, a day that would shatter everything. It was just another school day in Conway, New Hampshire. Fall was setting in, the air was crisp, and Abby was excited. Her 15th birthday was just days away, and she was planning a hiking trip with her outdoor club. That morning, she slipped on a brand new pair of hiking boots, a gift she couldn't wait to break in. But by the end of the school day, the boots were rubbing painfully against her feet, leaving blisters. Still, Abby didn't complain. Instead of taking the bus home, she decided to walk. It should have been a short, uneventful stroll. But Abby never made it back. When her mother, Xenia, realized Abby wasn't home by 5 p.m., panic began to creep in. Calls went unanswered. Texts delivered no response. Abby's phone was switched off. At first, Xenia tried to stay calm, thinking maybe her daughter was with friends. But as hours passed with no word, fear took over. By nightfall, Xenia and Sarah were at the police station, filing a missing persons report. Because Abby was a minor, the police wasted no time. Her face was plastered across local news stations, her description printed on flyers, and volunteers, hundreds of them, searched parks, forests, rivers, and abandoned buildings. The last signal from Abby's phone had been traced less than a mile from her home. Yet, she was gone. Detectives immediately started looking at those closest to her. Her boyfriend, Jimmy, just a year older than Abby, was grilled by investigators. Could he have had something to do with her disappearance? Did they argue? Did he have a motive? But Jimmy's alibi was airtight. He had been at sports practice, a school band rehearsal, and his grandfather's birthday party, all confirmed by teachers, family, and friends. He was heartbroken, desperate to help. And so the case went cold, Weeks turned into months. There were no witnesses, no clues, no leads. It was as if Abby had vanished into thin air. Then, 6 weeks later, a shocking twist. One afternoon, Xenia opened the family's mailbox and discovered a handwritten letter. It was from Abby. In shaky handwriting, the teenager wrote that she was alive, healthy, and safe. She told her mother and sister that she loved them, but she couldn't say where she was. At the bottom of the page, she had written a haunting phrase, "Dreams come true." Handwriting experts confirmed the letter was real. Abby had written it. The FBI now had to consider the possibility that Abby had run away voluntarily. Rumors spread. Maybe she was pregnant, maybe she had left with someone willingly. But Sarah, her sister, shut those theories down immediately. Abby told Sarah everything. If she had been pregnant, Sarah would have known. The FBI leaned toward another explanation, that Abby had been forced to write the letter, that she was alive, but being held against her will. And tragically, they were right. It's time to meet the man responsible for turning Abby's world upside down. Nathaniel Nate Kibbe. Born in July 1980, Nathaniel grew up in the same town as Abby. From an early age, he was trouble. He was already facing charges for assault, theft, and drugs. In 2013, just months before Abby vanished, Kibbe had already attempted to kidnap another teenage girl near a school bus stop. She managed to fight him off and escape. Shockingly, despite witnesses and evidence, the case was dropped. He faced no consequences, and now he was watching Abby walk home. As Abby limped along in her too tight boots, a pickup truck slowed beside her. He smiled, asked if she wanted a ride. Abby politely refused. But the truck didn't leave. It crawled along the curb as Kibbe kept talking. He noticed her limp, asked about it. When Abby admitted her boots had given her blisters, Kibbe offered again. "Hop in, I'll get you home faster." She hesitated, but he seemed harmless, even kind. After a moment, Abby gave in. She opened the passenger door. It was a mistake that would change her life forever. At first, he made small talk, joking to calm her nerves. But soon, he pulled into a deserted parking lot, claiming he needed to grab something from a hardware store. Abby grew uneasy. She told him she could walk the rest of the way. She reached for the seatbelt, planning to escape. But she never got the chance. Kibbe grabbed her, pulled out a gun, and pressed it to her face. He tied her hands and feet with zip ties. He shoved a cap over her head so she couldn't see. And when she tried to peek from under the brim, he shocked her with a stun gun until she went unconscious. When Abby opened her eyes, she found herself inside a tiny, windowless shipping container, hidden deep inside Kibbe's trailer park. There, her nightmare began. Kibbe taped her mouth, blindfolded her, and placed a motorcycle helmet over her head to disorient her. Then he assaulted her, again and again, for months. He threatened her constantly. If she tried to escape, if she made noise, if she disobeyed, he would kill her family. Sometimes he was violent, other times disturbingly tender, as though he expected her to play the role of a willing girlfriend. But Abby quickly learned one thing. His moods were unpredictable. Any wrong word, any slip of defiance could unleash his rage. She was trapped in darkness, hidden in a soundproof prison. The outside world had no idea she was right there, so close, yet so far. For weeks, Abby Hernandez lived in constant terror, locked inside a shipping container. Cut off from the world and under the control of a man who called himself her master. What no one knew, not her mother, not the police, not even the FBI, was that Abby was being held just miles from her home. At first, Abby was in shock. She thought she would never make it out alive. But she was smart. Even at just 14 years old, she began to think like a survivor. She realized something important. If she wanted to live, she had to play along. So she told Kibby she didn't judge him, that she understood he had made mistakes. She even promised she wouldn't go to the police if he let her go. It wasn't true, of course, but she hoped it might keep him calm. Kibby, however, was unpredictable. Some days he would rage, threatening her with violence. Other days, he would act like they were friends, even letting her watch TV with him. But the abuse never stopped, and the longer she stayed, the harder it was to hold on to hope. After a month, Kibby noticed the nationwide search efforts. He saw her face on the news, heard the FBI updates, and realized the police weren't giving up. So he forced Abby to write a letter to her mother. Abby tried, desperately, to slip in hidden clues, but Kibby caught her every time and punished her brutally. Eventually, she wrote exactly what he dictated. That was the letter her mother had found in the mailbox, 6 weeks after she disappeared. To the world, it was a mystery. Had Abby run away? Was she hiding? But in truth, she was living under the constant gaze of a man who controlled every breath she took. Incredibly, there were moments when Abby was closer to rescue than she ever realized. At one point, Kibby faced unrelated charges for illegally possessing a firearm. Police arrived at his trailer with a search warrant. They scoured the home, looking for evidence. Abby was inside the shipping container the entire time, but no one fought to check it. The police left, completely unaware that the missing teenager they had been searching for across the state was right there, only feet away. Kibby escaped with nothing more than a fine. Abby was left to endure more months in captivity. Kibby tried to keep his identity a secret. He demanded she call him master and avoided telling her his real name. But one day, Abby spotted it by accident in a magazine he had lying around. The name was Nathaniel Kibby. It was a dangerous moment, but Abby decided to take a risk. She casually addressed him as Nathaniel. He froze. His eyes narrowed. Then he simply smirked. He didn't deny it. He didn't lash out. He just asked how she had figured it out. For the first time, Abby knew the name of the man who had stolen her life. Months into her captivity, Kibby began to involve Abby in his criminal activities. He had started a counterfeit money operation, printing fake bills from his trailer. Sometimes he even let Abby help. It was dangerous, but it gave Abby something crucial: tiny moments of freedom. He occasionally allowed her into his trailer, let her cook meals, and even gave her books. But no matter how much he trusted her, the abuse continued. Abby was still his prisoner, and she never forgot it. By the summer of 2014, Abby had been missing for 9 months. Then, fate intervened. Kibby met a woman named Lorraine at a bar. He invited her to his trailer, and after they spent the night together, Lorraine complained she was struggling financially. Trying to impress her, Kibby handed her 2 $50 bills. But the bills were counterfeit. She called Kibby, screaming that she had reported him to the police. She told him that law enforcement would soon be back at his trailer, this time searching everything. That phone call changed Abby's life. On July 20th, 2014, Nathaniel Kibby made a shocking decision. He gathered Abby's belongings, tied her hands, put a baseball cap over her face, and drove her out of the trailer park. Was this the end? Was he going to kill her? Instead, he pulled over on a deserted country road. He looked at her and said, "Get out. And don't you dare go to the police." Then he drove off. Abby stood there in disbelief. For the first time in 9 months, she was free. She walked for hours, terrified Kibby might come back, until she saw a familiar road sign. She was close to home. A surveillance camera captured the moment Abby stepped through her front door. Her mother, Xenia, was on the phone when she heard a voice call out, "Mom." She dropped the phone, ran to her daughter, and pulled her into a tearful embrace. 9 months of fear, grief, and hopelessness evaporated in an instant. But the nightmare wasn't over, not yet. Abby was still terrified of Tibby's threats. At first, she refused to tell police who had taken her, afraid he would hurt her family. Only after a week did she finally reveal his name. On July 28, 2014, police surrounded Kibby's trailer. This time, they knew exactly who he was and what they were looking for. Kibby didn't resist. He was arrested on the spot. When investigators searched his property, they found overwhelming evidence. Abby's DNA, her belongings, traces of blood, hair, and even broken fingernails in the container where she had been held. The monster had finally been caught. Kibby's trial began in late 2014 and dragged on for nearly 2 years. At first, he denied everything, but the evidence was undeniable. Eventually, he took a plea deal, admitting guilt to kidnapping and multiple charges of sexual assault. In 2016, Nathaniel Kibby was sentenced to 90 years in prison, with no chance of parole for 45 years. He will be an old man before he even has the possibility of release. For Abby, it was a bittersweet victory. She told the court she forgave him, not for his sake, but for hers. Forgiveness, she said, was the only way she could move forward with her life. Her mother, however, had no such mercy. In her victim impact statement, Xenia said she hated him with every fiber of her being, but she was still grateful that, in the end, he had let her daughter come home. Abby's ordeal left deep scars, both physical and emotional, but her resilience became an inspiration. She chose to live, to fight, and to rebuild. Her story stands as a chilling reminder. Danger can appear in the form of a stranger who seems kind, who offers a helping hand. Yet, it's also a story of unimaginable strength. For 9 months, Abby Hernandez survived hell on earth, and she lived to tell her story. Not every missing child makes it home, but Abigail did, and her courage will never be forgotten. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoy watching, please hit the like button. And if you like watching more thriller and true crime story, make sure you subscribe our channel. See you in the next video.